Beethoven, but it's just Bakugou telling Eri to kill herself. By Mentally Papaya. Read by AngstEater to assist reading. Chapter 3. Daddy, look, You're gonna be back soon? Katsuki sighed, tying his tie in the small mirror above his dresser. Eri stood in the doorway, door open a crack so she could peek her little head in. Karyash had gone downstairs to deal with breakfast while Katsuki got ready for school, after he'd woken up to find the 6-year-old standing on the frame of Katsuki's bed, staring down at him while he slept. He didn't seem to know whether to be concerned or amused when Katsuki waved it off as, "Just what she always did." "I told you, kid. I'll be back in a few hours after lunch. I'll call to check up on you whenever I can during the day. And I've shown you how to call me if you need anything, so you'll be fine." Eri let go of the handle to cross her arms, pouting as the door swung inwards more, revealing her tiny, stubborn body. The shirt Katsuki had given her to wear, after finally convincing her to throw away that old sack she'd been wearing, swamped her, swallowing her little stick arms and collecting around her feet like a baggy dress. He really needed to buy her some clothes. He'd have to stop by someplace on the way home after school. "I don't want you to go," Eri decided suddenly, stomping one of her tiny feet. Katsuki rolled his eyes. "You want to come with me? Come outside and meet all the big pro heroes? Let them help you?" "No, I want you to stay here with me." "Well, tough titties, kitty." Katsuki flattened down his collar, turning away from the mirror to grab his bag from the bed. "I gotta go to school. You'll be fine. And I'll come back soon, all right?" Eri didn't respond, and when Katsuki turned around to grab his jacket and leave, he found Eri holding it in her hands, fingers tighter on the fabric. "You should stay here," she suggested forcefully. Katsuki sighed, taking a moment to look up at the ceiling and wonder why the fuck he'd decided to take this kid in. "Kid, give me the jacket." "No." "I need it. Give it back." "No." Katsuki took one step forward, and Eri bolted, little thumps sounding as she sprinted down the stairs. "Fucking damn it!" Karyash stood on the sidewalk, school stuff in hand, outside the Bakugou residence, wincing every time he heard a loud noise from inside. He could see through the open front door, Eri rushing from the kitchen to the living room, screaming as Katsuki followed behind. There was a thump, another scream, and then Katsuki emerged from the living area, walking down the hall with Eri flung over his shoulder in a fireman's carry. She yelled at him, beating his back with her little fists as Katsuki carried her up the stairs, a tired look on his face. Karyash snorted. After a few seconds, Katsuki came back down the stairs, his UA jacket in hand. "No, you stay up there. Time out until I lock this door," he responded to whatever Eri had been whining about as he left the house, stepping out before hesitating and leaning back in. "I'll be back soon. I promise." Karyash gave him a smug grin as Katsuki locked the door, turning and making his way over. "What?" "Nothing," Karyash said innocently. "Daddy Bakugou." "Oh, just do the world a favor and hang yourself." Katsuki threw his backpack on Karyash's head, effortlessly catching it again as Karyash stumbled back with a loud laugh. "She'll be okay, right?" Katsuki asked, as they started down the street towards the train station, where they would have to split up to get to their respective high schools. She's a smart kid. You've been gone for like 5 seconds. Stop worrying." Karyash rolled his eyes. "It's not like you can actually get a baby monitor for her. You'll probably call her every 10 minutes anyway. It's fine." "I know, but maybe a security camera for the living area, just to keep an eye on her." "Stop being an overprotective dad." "I'm not her dad." Karyash laughed in his face. Katsuki lagged behind him and stepped on the back of his shoe, smirking as he kept walking. "You dick." Karyash stumbled, leaning down to pull his shoe back on after rushing to catch up to his friend. He'd missed this. Going back to UA after the events of his weekend at home was weird. Katsuki found himself worried about Eri only 10 minutes after he'd arrived. He called as he walked up to the gates, letting her know where he was and checking up on her, where she'd spent the entire call whining about how bored she was going to be without him here, and how he was so mean to drag her up the stairs before he left. Katsuki smiled at the childish complaints. snorting before telling her she'd be fine and that he'd call the next time he was free. He, to be completely honest with himself, was not 100% sure how he was going to pull this whole thing off. As much as it seemed simple to keep the kid hidden, it would require a lot of sneaking around to avoid suspicion. He had no idea how long it would be before he got caught out, because he would get caught at some point. He wasn't stupid enough to think otherwise. And yet he was still sure about his decision to try. Maybe he was an idiot, but he felt for the girl. He couldn't help but remember the times when he was a kid and had been completely on his own. Either adults didn't care, weren't around, or didn't want to listen to him whenever he needed help. Hell, it wasn't rare for kids at his middle school to come up to him for help with stuff over their teachers, because they were so incompetent. Even kids that weren't in his class understood that. So he knew what it felt like to be alone, without anyone to trust and to rely on. He didn't want Erie to have to go through that, even if it was temporary. Until he could convince her to let him go to the pros, he would do his best to keep her safe and feeling secure. He managed, thankfully, to ignore the constant reminder in the back of his head that Erie was alone in his house, and threw himself into class and training with his classmates. The only difference was that he was constantly checking his phone for messages or missed calls from his house phone. But if anyone noticed that and thought it was odd, they didn't say anything. He managed to slip away while the other idiots were having lunch, sneaking onto the roof where there could be no prying ears before calling up again. "Mr. Katsuki?" Erie's hopeful voice came through immediately, sounding muffled through a mouthful of food. A relieved grin made its way onto Katsuki's face. "Hey, kiddo, just checking up on you," he replied, shoving his other hand in his pocket and leaning against the wall. "You get those sandwiches in the fridge I left for you, I'm guessing?" "They're so good," Katsuki snorted. "It's just ham and cheese, brat. When you're done, I left you a Kit Kat for a treat." Erie let out a shocked gasp. "You never said there was chocolate." "I hid it," he replied smugly. "It's in the fruit bowl, hidden under all those oranges. I'm only telling you where it is because you've been good while I'm gone. So don't make a mess or I'll throw away the rest of them once I get back." "That's so mean," Katsuki snorted. "You were held prisoner by the yakuza, and me throwing out chocolate is what's mean. I'm hurt, kid." "Kill yourself," Katsuki choked into the phone. "Fucking hell, don't say that to people." "I heard you say it to Uncle Karyaj tons of times last night, and you said it to me that one time." Katsuki stuttered, rubbing his eyes with his spare hand and trying to simultaneously come up with an excuse and battling with the words Uncle Karyaj. Okay. It's something only grown-ups can say. That's why I said it to Karyaj. And I was very tired when I said it to you. It was an accident." "Why are there words you can say but I can't? That's unfair," Erie whined. "Because I'm in charge. End of discussion," Katsuki replied dryly. Erie complained a little more, but ultimately thanked him for the chocolate and promised not to make a mess, and Katsuki felt fine to say goodbye and leave her to go back to class. He opened his message app and walked down the stairs from the roof, tapping out a quick text. Bakugou Katsuki to Ashikari Aji. Bakugou. Can you fucking believe I just got off the phone with the kid and she referred to you as Uncle Karyaj? Karyaj. Excuse me? No, I'm actually gonna be the best uncle ever. I'm gonna tell her all the stories of her dad doing reckless shit as a kid. Be warned, Katsuki. I'm gonna destroy her view of you as a mature person. Bakugou. I'm not her dad and you aren't her uncle. Karyaj. Do you think the stationery store will sell #1 uncle mugs? Bakugou. You understand you're coming over tonight, and thus I will have access to punch you soon. Karyaj. You're supposed to be setting an example for your daughter, Katsuki. Bakugou. Shut up. He managed to slip out of UA as the rest of his classmates were heading back to the dorms, avoiding questions and rushing down the street. He had to be quick if he wanted to stop by the store on the way back. He needed to get some clothes for Eri, groceries for the house, and some medical supplies to stock up on, now that he had a kid to look after. And any other shit that he saw would be good to have with a 6-year-old in the house. Thank fuck Todoroki had one of Endeavor's credit cards in his wallet that he frequently left out. Because Katsuki did not have this much money to spare. It's not like Todoroki would care. He reveled in any chance to waste his shitty dad's money. He managed to get the shopping done fairly quickly, the collection of about 13 bags weighing down his arms, as he managed to make it home by the record time of 3:45 p.m. He dropped the majority of them on the front step, letting out a breath of exhaustion, both mental and physical, before digging through his pocket to take out the front door key. "Eerie," he called as the door swung open, the noises of some kid show playing from the living room as he started transferring the plethora of plastic bags into the downstairs hallway. "I'm home. You okay?" "Mr. Katsuki?" Above the noise of the TV, Erie's excited greeting rang out, and soon her small frame was seen in the living area doorway. "You came back!" A pang of guilt flowed through Katsuki, and he gave her a smile. "Told you I would. Now come on and help me bring in the shopping." She liked the clothes, thank fuck, and made a complete and utter mess in the living area digging through them, while Katsuki kept an eye on her through the breakfast bar window and cooked dinner. Any chances of him telling her to keep things tidy flew out the window when he saw how full of joy she was at the little red dress Katsuki had picked out for her, ducking behind the couch to change into it and pairing it with a white undershirt and some black tights. She rushed out and into the kitchen before twirling around in a circle. "Ta-da!" she presented, a proud smile on her face. Katsuki snorted, pausing his carrot chopping to raise an eyebrow at her. "Not bad, kiddo. Who knew you were good at all that fashion shit, huh?" Erie giggled. "Just like you." "Me?" "Uncle Karyaj says you used to do fashion for money with your mom, like on a stage." Katsuki's face went flat, and he rolled his eyes. "Uncle Karyaj is looking for a fucking slap. Now go clear up all that shit you've strewn around the living room, brat." Karyaj got bored of procrastinating his homework and decided to drop by Katsuki's house early. He packed up his stuff, deciding to bring his textbooks with him on the off chance he felt like being more productive later on, before climbing out his window and sneaking out the house to go towards the Bakugou residence. When he got there, he, as always, went the window route, for nostalgia. When he dropped his overnight duffel and school bag through, he half expected Katsuki to tilt his head out the kitchen and snark at him for being needy, like usual, or for the kid to hear the noise and rush out of the living area to say hello. Instead, nobody heard the noise, and Karyaj was left to go sneak the house's occupants out himself. He narrowed his eyes in confusion at the empty living area and kitchen, the empty and still dirty dishes left on the counter signifying the pair's presence. Still confused, he started softly up the stairs, only to pause near the top, where he could see through the crack of the bathroom door Katsuki. He was sitting on the closed seat of the toilet, a calm look on his face as he handled a roll of bandages. Karyaj couldn't quite see what he was bandaging, but he could figure out from Erie's slightly glum voice that he must be cleaning and rewrapping the girl's arms. "They don't heal, more just appear." "That was before," Katsuki reminded her gently, and Karyaj couldn't stop a fond smile from flickering on his face at the softness of his friend. Fuck what anyone said. Bakugou Katsuki was a damn angel with kids. "Now there's nobody to hurt you, so more won't appear. In a week or two, these will all have started healing, and soon there won't be anything but some little marks." "I don't want to be covered in ugly marks." He could hear Erie sniff. "Nah," Katsuki assured, shaking his head. "They won't be ugly. Are you serious? They're gonna be awesome. You get to tell everyone you're such a badass that the Mafia tried to take you down, and you got away with nothing but some awesome scars. You know, when I was your age, I had a friend that wanted a battle scar so badly he jumped off the playground equipment and tried to impale his leg on a fence post." Karyaj snickered to himself quietly. That had been so funny he'd dropped his ice cream on the playground grass. Absolutely nobody had sympathy for Dehisa after that stunt. Erie sniffed again, a hopeful tilt to her voice. "Really?" "Oh, yeah. Moron did nothing but break a toe bone. Sobbed for hours. Only scar he got was a scratch on his toenail, and all that did was remind everyone of how much of a fucking idiot he was." Erie giggled slightly, and Katsuki leant down towards her slightly. "But you know what? Yours aren't fake or stupid. They're a sign of bravery, of the real fight you faced, and that you won. You, kid, are gonna be a real living legend when these scar over. Thanks, Mr. Katsuki. No problem, brat. Karyaj slowly went down the stairs, deciding to just wait for the pair back on the couch. Katsuki managed to get Eri to bed at 8, like planned. He put her to bed in his room, leaving Karyaj to sleep on the couch and to make some quick lunch and breakfast preparations before slinking back into the evening to UA. He managed to make it back 5 minutes before curfew, something Aizawa narrowed his eyes at but accepted, with Katsuki's excuse that he'd been hanging out with friends. Frankly, Katsuki had the sneaking suspicion that the man was just surprised at the concept of him having friends outside the class. But fuck him. Katsuki had grown up in the biggest, most idiotic group of kids in the neighborhood. He had tons of fucking friends. They were idiots, but they were there. Tuesday once again went fine. He phoned Eri to check up on her after Karyaj messaged to say she'd had breakfast and he'd left, and continued throughout his day much like the day before. The fact that he'd managed to actually pull off a day and night of school while Eri was at home did admittedly make him a bit more confident in this whole game, though he did wonder how long he could go without spending a single second at UA that wasn't necessary before people started demanding answers. Kirishima and Ashido in particular, he knew, tended to love gossip. After 3, he slipped away again, and stopped at a store on the way home, again, except this time he used his own money. When he got home at about 20 to 4, he opened the door to find Eri standing on the banister, perched, staring at the door in wait, like a gargoyle. Katsuki walked in, and shut the door behind him without breaking eye contact. "TV not interesting enough for you this time?" he asked, shifting the paper bag he was holding with one hand. "Just making sure you came back," Eri responded, face blank as she bored holes into Katsuki with her eyes. Katsuki sighed. "You're lucky I grew up with Deku, or this staring shit would freak me out," he claimed, dropping his backpack on the floor and stepping forward so he could hold out his one free arm, collecting the child from the banister while waiting until she was comfortably sitting on his hip, but not touching any of his skin, before moving into the living room. "Did you get me more fashion?" Eri asked, poking the brown paper bag. "No, I got something else," Katsuki said. He placed Eri down on the couch before taking a breath and tipping the bag over on the coffee table. "What's that for?" Eri asked, furrowing her eyebrows slightly at the colorful books before tilting her head and looking at him. "You're 6 years old. That means you're old enough to be starting school," Katsuki started. "Like you?" "Yeah, like me, except you obviously can't go to a school, so you need to start doing some schoolwork at home, got it?" Eri looked hesitant, and he snorted. "There's no need to look so fucking terrified. I'm gonna help you go through it, and you're smart, so you'll get it quick. Just let me start dinner, and I'll show you what to do." When Karyaj came over that evening, it was late enough that Eri had already been put to bed, and Katsuki got to hear him fall through the window in the hall while cleaning up the living room. "Can you just, once use the door?" he said, even though he knew it would be useless. "What's the fun in that?" "Yep." "Whatever. There's some leftover shit on the stove if you want it. I need to get back to UA. Kid's sleeping, so don't wake her up." "Cool." Karyaj dropped his bag and let himself fall back onto the couch. "What's all that shit? They workbooks?" He leaned forward to read the titles as Katsuki swept them up into a neater stack on the coffee table. "A little young for UA homework, ain't they?" "It's for the brat, dipshit." "So you got her doing schoolwork?" "She's 6, that's schooling age. I told her since she couldn't actually go to real school, she'd have to start doing this stuff at home instead." Karyaj looked at him for a moment, before leaning back on the couch and bursting into laughter. Katsuki looked at him, offended for a second, before smacking him in the face with a math book. "Shut the fuck up before you wake up the kid." Karyaj wheezed. Sorry, it's just, man, I fucking love you, Katsuki." Katsuki stared at him with a baffled expression, before shaking his head. "You need professional help," he muttered. moving out of the living room and into the kitchen to finish putting away the stuff he'd gotten out to make Erie's lunch. Karyaj craned his neck to turn around and grin at him through the breakfast bar window as he did so. Can we just roll back and talk through the events that have transpired since Saturday? Katsuki huffed, putting the butter back in the fridge. I'd rather you didn't, but I'm guessing my opinion isn't really relevant, because in the past 4 days... Yep, Katsuki sighed. You found a kid, and got her pretty much to trust you over God and All Might himself, and allowed her to stay under your care for the foreseeable future. Within 4 days, Saturday to Tuesday, right? Between Saturday and now, you've already bought her her own belongings. She's calling me her uncle, simply because I'm friends with you. And now, not only are you homeschooling her, but you're actively referring to your house as her home. You, sir, have managed to become a parent in under a week. By the time he was finished with his little speech, Katsuki was leaning both palms on the kitchen counter, glaring directly at his childhood friend, of whom he was starting to wish he'd shoved into rivers more as a kid. I'm not her dad, I'm literally 16. I'm just good at being a hero. Karyaj made a buzzer sound. Survey says nope. And we both know you've basically been a 26-year-old stuck in a child's body since you were 7. You know, just because we grew up together doesn't mean I won't leave you paralyzed. And I'm sure you could, but that's irrelevant. Karyaj waved off. If you were just being a good hero, you would have reported her the second you found her. You care about her. Katsuki opened his mouth and shut it again a second later. Karyaj latched onto this weakness like the true dickhead he was. This is amazing! You know, I always thought you'd be the most likely out of all of us to become a teen dad. But that was because you're a slut, not because you're a good person. Karyaj had a split lip and a bruised cranium when Katsuki left for UA that night. Cutting it close again, Bakugou, Aizawa told him, narrowing his eyes when Katsuki walked into the dorms with 5 seconds to spare. Is it against the rules to cut it close, sensei? Katsuki responded coolly. Aizawa narrowed his eyes further. I suppose not. Great, I'm going to bed. Great. Izuku was calmly enjoying his evening. He was just finishing up some homework, humming happily to himself, when his peace was suddenly disrupted by harsh, violent banging against his dorm room door. After a few seconds of alarmed staring, he jumped up quickly to answer it. He was greeted by Katsuki, glaring at him, before reaching up to shove him to the floor. Baffled, Izuku looked up at the blonde from his new position on the ground. Ka-chan? This is your fucking fault, you quirkless fuck, Katsuki hissed. You got me used to looking after destitute, weak infants. You made it my normal. All of this is on you. Still baffled, Izuku watched as Katsuki flipped him off with both of his hands, before reaching in and grabbing his door handle, slamming it back shut again, and leaving him alone, on the floor, probably more confused than he'd ever been in his life. End of Chapter 3. Be sure to support the author and leave your reactions in the link to the original work. I love Katsuki and Karyaj's relationship in this fanfic. They're hilarious. And they're part of a trio, so the third character, Dehisa, he's in the chapter after the next chapter, so give it like 2 chapters and he'll arrive. And now you're thinking to yourself, I don't know who Dehisa is. Yes, you do. You do. He was in the first episode of My Hero Academia. He was the kid in the back of the classroom that had really long fingers. He was like Katsuki's little friend bully, and he had those really stupidly long fingers. But I guess I shouldn't talk about him yet, if he's not introduced yet. I just love Mentally Papaya's ability to turn NPCs into lovable characters. If Mentally Papaya writes a book, I will buy it. Thank you.